So this might be one of the most important videos that I share. Time will tell, and you can be the judge of that. I was waiting and debating about when to share this information that I found and whether or not it's even the right thing to do. But after listening to Brother Mark, and I'll tag him down below so you can listen to his video about the Jacob's trouble, it just really encouraged me and inspired me to want to kind of share this that I found. And so it's a lot of information. There's a lot that's going to be said, so I need you to lock in. I need you to give complete attention. So if you need to take a moment or save this video, come back to it at a later time, watch Brother's Mark video, and then you can come back to this video. But I think this is very, very important, and I don't believe in coincidences, and I really want the believers who are watching and waiting for Christ to see this. So in Leviticus 23, there is the 7 feasts of the Lord. Now these are God's feasts, and he wanted Israel to participate in these feasts every year because they're called appointed times, and they're moedims, meaning they're appointed times, and they're basically dress rehearsals. So these guys are supposed to participate in these feasts because these feasts are a representation of how God will show up, because God's going to show up on these feast dates, and Israel needs to participate and have this ingrained in their mind, in their society, in their culture, to know exactly how and when God will show up. And this has been for thousands of years. So the first feast is called Passover, and this is representation of when they were in Egypt, and the angel of death would pass over. If they had the lamb's blood on their doorpost, the angel of death would pass over. And so they keep on participating in Passover. And during that Passover week, they have the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and at the end of it, they have first fruits. And so when Jesus came the first time, he presented himself as the lamb. That's what Palm Sunday is. He presents himself as a lamb. He's fulfilling this feast day as the lamb. And then in their culture, there's a lot that goes with the unleavened bread, it's scored, meaning same with Jesus. It's, the bread is hidden underneath their bed. And same with Jesus, it was hidden underneath the earth, and he fulfilled that day when he was crucified and put to death and buried. And then first fruits is when Jesus rose. He fulfilled that feast day. On that day, he rose from the grave. Okay, and these are the spring feasts. And then you have the summer feast, which is Pentecost. This is when the Holy Spirit, who is also God, fulfilled this feast date. Now, the first 4 feast dates have been fulfilled, right? There's the last 3, which is Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, and Tabernacles. Now, Feast of Trumpets is just a celebration. There's really not in the Bible a lot that is spoken about Feast of Trumpets. It's just this weird little event that takes place. That's not much is said about it at all throughout the Israel's whole genealogy and their whole Bible, the Old Testament. There's not a lot spoken of it. Then you have the Day of Atonement. This is where you're supposed to fast and atone for the things that you have done. Okay. This is a huge repentive holiday where Israel will repent and make atonement for what they've done. Okay. And then Tabernacles means that God dwells with us. Okay. And what they do in this feast is they live in tents. They go to Israel, they go to Jerusalem, they go and they live in tents for 7 days. It's a portable dwelling for 7 days, and then they go and they celebrate the feast, which means God lives with us, okay? Now, these last 3 have not been fulfilled, okay? Now, I strongly believe, and I could be wrong about this, and, I'm always watching and waiting for Jesus, but I strongly believe that the rapture will take place 1 year on the Feast of Trumpets, because God uses their traditions as well. Like I said, one of the traditions about the unleavened bread, God uses the traditions to fulfill this. They just show Israel, okay? Now, traditionally, this is the day and hour no one knows. This is what Jesus says, on that day and hour no one knows. That's he's referring to the rapture of the church, and it pairs with the Feast of Trumpets. Why? Because we know when we're raptured with the trumpet, okay? And so the Feast of Trumpets is a day that they watch for the new moon. It's the biblical new year of the month, and they watch for the new moon, and no one knows what day or what hour. They have a figure because it's, moon has a cycle, and every 28 days or whatever, they have this cycle, so they know when to look, but they don't know the day or the hour. And now, here's a very interesting fact that whenever, like last year, whenever they can't find the moon when it's supposed to be, and it's prolonged, right? There has to be 7 days between Feast of Trumpets and Day of Atonement. Now, I think that's very remarkable because they're saying there has to be a week between these two events. Now, Day of Atonement, I 100% believe, is the day that Jesus returns back to this earth. After the tribulation, the second coming of Christ will be on the Day of Atonement. In fact, the spirit of the Antichrist seeks to change the appointed times because he doesn't want them to be watching for Jesus, okay? Ready for Jesus, or accepting Jesus, or repenting to Jesus, okay? Now, Jesus returns on the Day of Atonement. Now, the last feast is Tabernacles, and I believe this is the day when God the Father comes into this dimension at the end of the 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ. This is when God the Father comes to earth, okay? And now, the reason why I say it is because of the 7 days, 7,000 years parable, and tabernacles mean God dwells with us. And this is what God will live with man for the rest of eternity after this takes place. And I believe it will be on that. In fact, during the millennial reign, the only holiday that happens during the feast, or during the 1,000-year millennial reign, is Tabernacles, because that's the only one that's not fulfilled. They don't make them celebrate Passover. They don't make them celebrate Day of Atonement. They only celebrate Tabernacles because it's the last one to be fulfilled. This is my personal belief, and this is where I'm showing you. So I believe the rapture will take place 1 year on Feast of Trumpets, and then Day of Atonement, Jesus will return, and then Tabernacles, God will dwell with man. These are the last 3 that need to be fulfilled. Now, let me show you something else I found. So this year, Feast of Trumpets is September 22nd to 24th, 2025. All right, and I believe the rapture could take place at this Feast of Trumpets. Now, after that will be the Gog and Magog invasion, the Gog and Magog war, whatever you want to call this, right? That takes place in between the rapture and the confirming of covenant, because this confirms the covenant because of this, okay, because of the world war that we're going to be entering into. That would mean that October 21st, 2025 would be the confirming of the covenant, okay? This is the covenant of death. This is what Daniel 9:27 is about, right? And this begins Daniel's 70th week. Now, if the confirming of the covenant happens on this day, then 1,260 days for the ministry of the 2 witnesses take place. Then that puts April 3rd, 2029 for the Passover week abomination of desolation. Is it a coincidence that during that week, if you count 1,260 days, it turns out to be Passover, and this is when the abomination of desolation will take place, where the Antichrist, the lawless one, comes and he sets up his throne in the temple and says that he is God during the Passover week? Is that just a coincidence that takes place? And then the abomination of desolation takes place, and then you have 1,260 days of Israel in the wilderness. This is where God told Israel to flee. And so this is 1,260 days of Israel in the wilderness. So that would mean that Jesus returns September 15th, 2032, which is the Day of Atonement. Okay, that exactly works out to the Day of Atonement. Now, if you take 30 days, because Daniel talks about 1,290 days from the abomination of desolation, then that's right here, 90 days, that would be 30 days for the sheep and goat judgment. Well, then Daniel also talks about there's 1,335 days right? Blessed are those days, right? So that's another extra 45 days to cleanse the temple, right? And that puts us 1,335 days into Hanukkah week, November 27th to December 5th, 2032. This is Hanukkah week. The dates, everything works out that's when Hanukkah takes place. Now, this isn't a feast of the Lord, but if you know what Hanukkah is about, it's about cleansing of the temple. Okay, and even Jesus celebrated this in the Bible. He celebrated Hanukkah. All right, so that would put this days, right, into that. Now, that's all coincidence, right? Who knows, right? Now you might be saying, "Oh, well, you're date setting." Well, yeah, I am actually. Call it what it is. I'll say it. That I'm setting a date. I don't believe in coincidences, right? And when these feast dates line up exactly how the Bible foretells the days of the tribulation will be, I have to take notice, and you have to take notice. There's so much pointing to us going home soon. And I think we should be watching and waiting and living our life for Jesus now. But if I am correct and we're leaving this Feast of Trumpets, doesn't that put intensity in your heart to want to speak Christ boldly, to speak life into people's world right now, to do whatever God's called you to do? Doesn't that make you set on fire to say, look, I've got to do it now. I have no more time. Look at what's going on in the world. Look at these dates that I just gave you. Jesus is coming soon. We got to say, we have to be bold. We have to go out on a limb. We have to make huge leaps in faith right now. There are people in our lives that's going to perish, and God has placed them in your life for a specific reason, for a specific time such as this. If we are the last generation to be walking on this earth, God chose you and I to be here for that generation, to be here for this. He has called us to a high calling. We must warn. We must tell everyone. Jesus is coming soon. Blessed is the servant whom the master finds working. Let's work for the Lord like never before. It is coming to an end. It's wrapping up. Move now while you can.